Thanks for plugging in to Rethinking the Dollar. I'm excited to have my guest, David Quintieri from the Money GPS, sit down to discuss his book, The Money GPS, as well as to give his thoughts on the economy. I hope you enjoy this interview. Click the subscribe button for more interviews to come. Thanks.
Welcome to Rethinking the Dollar. Today I'm excited to have my guest, David Quintieri from Money GPS. David is a author, video commentator, as well as a monetary educator. He has been featured on several news channels on the internet, as well as authored a great book called The Money GPS, Guiding You Through an Uncertain Economy. So he's here to discuss his book, as well as a lot of global events going on around the world. Welcome, David, to Rethinking the Dollar.
Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. Definitely, you are a man that I follow. You do a great job of posting things daily that's very detailed and precise and accurate on what's going on globally. So I want to thank you for your efforts to inform and to educate the public.
It's something that I do regularly, and it's great to talk to people all over the world who are interested in this information. And it doesn't seem to be based on any particular region. It seems like everybody is concerned about this situation that's taking place.
All right, correct. Now, without further ado, got a lot of questions for you. Want to dive into some Rethinking a Dollar questions first, and then get into your book, The Money GPS. And so, what comes to mind when you hear the words Rethinking the Dollar?
Well, essentially what's happened is we've had this reserve currency in place, and most of the young people today don't really know about reserve currencies. They just assume that everything's going to stay the way it is. But every so many decades, 30 to 40 years, they say that we have a new reserve currency. So when we rethink the dollar, it's really something that really should bring us back in the pages of history where we have gone on these other dollar standards or the gold standard or what have you, basically a new monetary system. So there will be another monetary system. The question is still up in the air as to what it may be.
Right. Now, in this day and age, you mentioned there's a lot of things going on. Why is it important now for citizens globally, for the most part, to begin taking more of an interest in their own financial practices, as well as just our monetary circumstances and policies in general? Why is that important now?
Well, we can see where the trend is, and obviously, if you look at the past few decades, we have seen a decline in the amount of money that individuals have, their real wealth, let's say. This has been declining. We used to have this situation where one person in the household working was enough to afford, a few kids, the 2 cars, and the whole house and all that. And now today, that simply just doesn't happen very often. So this is the situation that we're in, and it is really a global phenomenon, really, that has been taking place, and we can foresee this to get worse in the future. Since the financial crisis, everything has been exacerbated, and I suspect that it will continue.
Right. Now, as far as the fact that there's a lot going on, and the mainstream media doesn't do a good job of reporting on the actual truth outside of the country, nevertheless, inside the country. So that's good to say that in the educational system is non-existent. Why is there no basics for, just your personal finances or monetary history that's in depth and detailed? Why do you think that's so?
Right. So it is not in the best interests of the bankers to have that. That's why they don't allow that to occur. The education system, if anyone's ever read The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Thompson Iserby, that's an incredible book and breaks it all down for you. But essentially what we have is a situation that the elite are in control, and they want to maintain that control. In order to do that, they have to keep the education system based around things that don't really matter so much, keep the focus very limited, and do not encourage critical thinking. If you had all your finances in order and everything was all set, then you really wouldn't have a need for big government. But as we can see, no matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or what have you, everything continues to get worse.
Right. I think you hit it right on the nail when you said critical thinking. There's, everything. If everything you use is smart, smartphone, smart TV, smart this, which basically says you don't have to use your own brain, which means you can turn it off at times, which means you're not in a state of mind to be able to critically think or to really analyze or question or things like that. So definitely, I guess, it's unfortunate that's the way we're in, with this world we're in now, but that's what it is now. If you were given a chance to give the Dave Quintieri state of the economy address, what would it entail and why?
Well, the fact is that people need to get a handle on everything that's going on in their lives. So that would be obviously of most importance. It isn't about necessarily just the financial system, but we need to look into the deeper teachings of what's going on out there. Yes, you need to realize that tomorrow, there could be a natural disaster, for example, that, wipes away your house, for example. What have you done to prepare? Everyone believes that everything is already done for them and will already be there. But look at the situation with Hurricane Katrina and all the other ones that have existed. We know specifically that there isn't really a safety net there for us. So preparation is essentially the main theme here, and that is what I stress to everybody. Whether you do a few steps or whether you go all out, it is essential, it is crucial.
Right. Now we're going to get into your book now, The Money GPS, guiding you through an uncertain economy and why. Why did you write that book? How did it come about? I know you originally released it in 2012. How did that book come about? What inspired you? Give us some insight into that.
Right. So after years of research, I started to tell friends and family about what's coming down, what's the situation is. And, most people, they don't really care about it, and they think that, this really, it's not interesting to me. So I decided to, as I'm reading, I already had a bunch of notes. So the notes started building up and building up, and soon we have this huge pile, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to make it really convincing. I'm going to write a book. So I decided to write the book, and many family members did read the book. However, a good pat on the back wasn't exactly the reaction I was hoping for. I wanted them to actually begin to prepare and take it seriously. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. But because of YouTube, because of everything that's happened with my book since I've written it, I've been able to connect with a lot of like-minded people. So it is definitely a success in that way. And individuals who are watching this now, for example, are getting to know who I am, and basically this will spread, and the whole message is all about financial education. That's what I never got taught in school, and I always was concerned about it. So throughout my education that I've done on my own, I was basically able to condense down tons and tons of books and white papers and articles and everything, condense it down to this simple book that anyone can read, and they can get the foundation of their financial education.
Right. Now, you mentioned financial education. Now, do you think there's a distinction or a difference between, because what I consider in the whole concept of rethinking the dollar, my goal is monetary education, which ultimately leads to a better financial education as far as being able to handle your own resources. Now, do you consider monetary education and financial education the same, or are they different, or how would you distinguish between the two, if you would?
For me, essentially, I don't necessarily create a distinction in between the two.
Right.
My goal is to inform the people that there's a bad situation occurring. That's all I'm trying to do.
Right.
It's saying, look at these charts, look at these facts, look at what's happening, and look at the trend. And then I take that information and relate it to what has happened historically. Look, this has happened 3 times before, and also it's happened in different geographical areas. And then relate it to how this is all happening as we speak. No one ever is able to determine what's happened as it occurs. They're always thinking, oh yeah, this happened in the past. So it's really a game of trying to use the historical figures, see what could happen in the future, and basically try to disseminate that to the public.
Right. Now, the book is broken down into 4 parts. And in part 1, the foundation, you mentioned a lot of key concepts. And the one I wanted to hit on was the central banking, increased debt, and unemployment. Can you touch on those different sections there and how they are interconnected and how they relate?
Essentially, because you have central banking, you have unemployment, you have increasing debt.
Right.
That's its design. That's its whole point, is to control the monetary system and do it in such a way that basically increases poverty. It sounds ridiculous to think about for somebody who doesn't know anything, but that is in fact why it exists. Not just to empower the elite and the bankers, because ultimately that's not their entire goal. They want people to be poor so that they're enslaved by them. And that's really what this is all about: monetary slavery, putting people into debt every single time they have that $1. It is born out of debt. That's what people don't understand about the monetary system. It isn't wealth anymore. It's all based upon debt. We used to have a system, I'm sure all your viewers know, we used to have a system where you can have a bill, but that bill was really just a certificate for real money. But all of a sudden, they started going through different crises, and over time, there is less and less reserve in the bank. And all of a sudden, they said, look, we can't do with this. It just really is a restriction on the powers of central banking. So they got rid of that. And the final straw, that linchpin, was 1971 when Richard Nixon pulled the US and by extension the whole world off the gold standard. And you can see every chart that I've shown in my book or on my videos or anything, from 1971 up until present day, everything moves upward.
Right now,
you can see it. No matter what it is, it's always moving upward.
Yeah, it's a lot of people mention, it's parabolic to where it's just skyrocketing all of a sudden. Like things are so bad to where they're just taking off, and eventually they might lose control of it all. So
that's right.
Very interesting. Now, in section 2, you talk about history. Now you dive into the 1920s. The whole section, the whole chapter rather, is all based upon 1920s things that happened in that time frame. You know, what made you go back that far, and what are some of the things that really triggered and got things started to where, you know, we're here today suffering from some things that may have happened in the 20s, or what can we learn from the 20s?
That's right. So 1920 is actually very crucial that I began with that. I was going to put in information earlier, and I do touch on other points in there, how the stock market formed and everything, which was earlier than that. But I started the history section specifically with 1920 because that's the lesson that needs to be learned from every single crash ever since. They've never done what happened in 1920, and for those who don't know, in fact, many people don't know, that there was a depression in 1920, not 1929, but 1920. And essentially what happened is you had this massive fall, and right away, the Federal Reserve, for one time, didn't react. They didn't go in and intervene in the market. So within about a year and a half or so, the market comes back up and starts booming, and then we have the roaring 20s. So without a real big intervention by the Federal Reserve, quantitative easing, QE 1, 2, 3, and all these things, they didn't do it. They just left out of it, and they just said, let's let the market forces take control here. And that's what happened. Government spending was slashed, if my memory serves me correctly, by 60%. 60% of government spending slashed immediately. And that's how they were able to do this. Right now, the government spending just increases every single year. No matter how bad the situation is, Obama says, let's just sign an executive order, sign a memorandum, whatever we have to do, let's increase the debt ceiling. And every time they do this, what happens? The debt increases. Yeah. So they haven't learned the lesson from 1920. They're not going to learn the lesson ever again. And we know specifically because of all of this, everything that's happened since, we can predict that it will once again collapse.
Right. Now, to move ahead further, you have a section there called Making Money, and it's dealing with different asset classes. Now, let's get into some of the good components of the economy and how you can protect and how you can preserve your capital and things like that. Give us some details of what that chapter is about, and go into depth a little bit for us.
Sure. So the situation obviously may not look very bright for the collapse scenario, but you need to understand that this is the reality. So what do? We have to prepare with our current funds, and you're making income. What do you do with that? Do you put it in the bank? I believe absolutely not. So the very first step is, number one, pay off your debt. That is the most important thing because the bankers control the debt and therefore have control over you. So if you pay off the debt, they have less of control over you and everything that you do. That's number one. You also need to get into real assets. So take the money out of the banking system, and that hurts them in multiple ways because they, quite frankly, don't have control, as well as the fact that you defund their fractional reserve banking. So you pull the money out and you buy real assets. I'm not one to believe that 100% of your money should be in precious metals. I do believe that precious metals are essential to hold, because they preserve wealth extremely well over long periods of time, generation through generation. So you definitely want to have some precious metals. That is very certain and pretty obvious. I'm sure your viewers know about that. I believe in the most wide diversification as possible. So yes, gold and silver, but also different denominations of gold and silver, different types. You want junk silver, you want coins, you want bullion. Every different type, the more diversification, the better. I also believe that you should get into real estate. Many people think, well, I can't afford a $1 million home. If you look in Toronto, the prices of the homes here are absolutely skyrocketing. And, your average home is, $1 million in many areas. So people think, well, I quite frankly can't afford $1 million, so real estate is not an option. Well, think small. That's what I say in my book. Think small. Don't think big. Think about a parking spot. If you could buy a parking spot, maybe it's $20,000, $40,000, depending on the area. That's a much smaller investment than thinking of that $1 million or $500,000 home. What about a storage locker? Storage lockers can be much cheaper, and you can have the peace of mind. You don't have to worry about your renters. Not as big of a deal for people, particularly if they don't have much time or much money to invest. Right. Things like this. That's why I always say, think small. So these are other things that you need to look into. I also believe in businesses as well. You can do jobs on the side. People think that their 9-to-5 job is the only source of their income, but you need to also look to alternative sources of income. So that's what I'll say about that. And just essentially get a handle on every type of real asset that you possibly can.
Right. I've recently talked to a friend, and we got into the subject of just the economy, and he was asking me, if someone gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? And I, since I've, studied some, I've steered away from the conventional wisdom of, put it here, put it here, put it here, because long term it's going to grow and produce this for you. And basically told him that now things are so uncertain now, where the idea of putting something in a so-called asset or something, expecting it to grow long term, may not be the case. So you might want to diversify now in things that produce right now, as opposed to down the line, just because you never know. And especially with all this, collapse and economy things happening, you never know. So, well, what I wanted to get into now is if there's a collapse coming or a reset, how would you categorize and what do you call it? Is it a reset? Is it a meltdown? Or what are some of the things that, that you would describe what some people are predicting is going to occur or happening right now? Or
well, in a way, it's something that has happened before. We have had crashes. We can expect that the stock market will crash. It's overvalued. Mm-hmm. But a new monetary system will basically become sort of an evolution of what we've had. Mm-hmm. So we will see things that would never have happened before. I believe that they could, in fact, use the derivatives, which in my book I quote the number of 1.5 quadrillion of derivatives. I've seen other numbers around 700 trillion. At these numbers, it doesn't even matter what the real number is. It's so far gone. It's absolutely ridiculous at this point. If the derivatives were to crash, and there's never a bailout that could ever pay for this. So if the derivatives crash, we will see something we have never seen in all of history. I don't know what that necessarily would be, because we have nothing to base it on in a historical context. Right. So I would imagine it would be absolutely astronomical and destructive. This is something that worries me. You don't hear anybody in the mainstream media talking about it, and many people in the alternative news aren't even talking about it. But it is something that I consistently mention because it's the most uncertain thing. And like I said, a lot of people just don't seem to be worrying about it. But all the different companies, even banks in Canada, all around the world, you see these derivatives being traded, and they are oftentimes one single bank will have more derivatives than the entire GDP of that country.
Now,
there's no way this could ever be bailed out.
Derivatives is something that definitely your ordinary common citizen, everyday person, just 9 to 5, or unless you're in the financial sector, you may never have heard of the word derivative. Give us a brief description of what a derivative is and how it basically makes up our financial system to this day.
So derivatives really started to evolve let's say back in the 1980s is when they really started to expand.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to read a great book on where it all began, you can read Frank Partnoy's book, Infectious Greed. That's an incredible book. Talks all about that and everything that's happened with Enron and all of this. Essentially what they've done was, in certain cases, they have little to no collateral, but they still want to gamble billions and trillions of dollars because it's more fun to them. Ultimately, they'll get a bailout anyway. So they were able to do this because they simply decided it was okay. Nobody said it was a law. Nobody said anything, but they created these derivatives out of thin air, just like a central bank does, sometimes with no underlying asset at all. This should be illegal, but of course it's not. So essentially what we've had is, for example, Enron, what they did, they created derivatives from the weather. So it's literally just gambling on what the weather could be.
Really?
Is it going to rain tomorrow? Is it going to be sunny tomorrow? And they gamble on that. And that's a weather derivatives. But then other things that we've seen during the subprime mortgage crisis, for example, we had the asset-backed securities. So they take things or collateralized debt obligations. Let's take that one, for example, CDOs. And they have credit card debt, they have mortgages, they have car loans. They take them all, they put them inside a little package, they put a nice little bow on top, and they sell it to an investor and get their friends in the rating agencies to rate them at AAA, and then they sell them out on the market. This is what a derivative is. It's an absolute piece of garbage being sold as a AAA investment.
All right. Now, derivatives. There's a lot of concern about what's happening in Greece right now, saying that the Grexit, as they say, could cause a ripple effect in the derivatives market, as well as the situation in Syria and Ukraine. There's so many black swan type of things that could occur to cause a ripple effect in these derivatives. Now, how come these are some primary and main subject matters that aren't talked about? I mean, is it to keep everybody calm? I mean, or what?
That's exactly it. They want everybody to stay calm, even within the financial industry, even at the mid-levels, I would say. They want everybody to just keep the status quo, keep your money investing, and get more people to put their money in. When a certain event happens, whether it's the Lehman Brothers crash or what have you, they're never prepared for it. Although the people in the high levels surely know about this, but the people in the mid-levels and everyone downstream never know about what's going to happen. And we can see what has taken place just in the financial crisis. There are going to be catastrophes that we can see throughout this. Look at the stock market, how overvalued it is. It is just screaming overvalued, but everyone still says, no, don't worry about it. Everything's good. Everything's just fun.
Right.
But truthfully, you cannot continue it like this. And, really, this is what's happening with the mainstream media publicizing, don't worry, everything's fine, everything's fine. It's all because it's controlled by a few small people at the top. This has been outlined many times, you can see, but they say there are 6 corporations which essentially control all the media around the world. If you look into it even deeper, it's actually even less than that, but loosely we can see 6 corporations controlling the media. Doesn't take much to keep the public calm.
Yeah. Now, we're calm here. We're pretty much dumbed down by, non-news or unimportant news. We have the Jenner situation. I mean, just so many distractions going on. It's amazing. But yet the East, nations out to the East, your Russia, China, India, the BRIC nations, they're aware of some things, and they are proactively preparing and positioning themselves to either ride a storm or reset some things. What are your thoughts on the BRICS and all the AIIB and all the activity happening to the east of us?
They're obviously looking towards the future. That's clear. They're not necessarily, well, they are in some ways. For example, China is partnered up with the US. They're still buying their debt. Very clear. You can't deny that. However, we can see them starting to set up these organizations like the AAIB and others, and they're basically trying to suggest the fact that, look, we have a partnership now, but a few decades from now, we're going to be the ones on top. Mm-hmm. So we're going to set up all the foundation now, and then later on we will certainly have to, change what we're doing. There have been many instances where they start to begin to sell off U.S. debt, and then they'll buy it back up. So it's really this game, the seesaw that they're playing. But regardless, we know what's happening. We have seen the quotations from the highest levels of both Russia, both China, and they're saying that the future of the friendship with the U.S. is really not going to be something that it is today. We can already see with the South China Sea what's happening. There's a lot of tension happening, not just with the monetary issues, but also the geopolitical issues as well. So what we have is a future that's going to be a lot different than what we are seeing today, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now, how would you begin, beyond your book, what would you do to educate people? How do you, I saw you have a free e-course. What are some recommendations on how to, take someone, say, a single parent mom or someone who has no real background, no understanding, very limited resources. How would you begin to educate them and encourage them and where to point them to get information like this?
Right. So I would say the very beginning would be to begin on YouTube, no doubt. There's a lot of false information that you'll find, of course, but you got to sift through that. There are also definitely some books out there that you want to read. Start with the fundamental type books. You don't want to get into really complex things at all. I don't even think those are necessary. Many of the books that I've read, really, I mean, it was great information, but far too detailed for the general common individual. I would also recommend that people begin to look at the mainstream media, but look at it only to determine the trend. Where is this all going? There's also the number one thing that I tell people to do, as I said before, is to get out of debt. So if you're just your average person, you need to get out of debt. Many people they contact me, email me from all over the world every day. They're telling me they're in so much debt, and we often find tens of thousands of dollars of debt for these individuals. They say they're working their 9-to-5 job and they're just struggling to pay it off. Oftentimes I suggest that people, number one, they have to take a second job a lot of times. And many people don't want to do that, but this is a tough time. And with the thought that interest rates could be rising, everything could be changing in the future. We need to get on this right away. I would also suggest people, just a few tips here, to call their companies that they have agreements with, whether it's your cell phone provider, your insurance provider, whatever have you. Call them up and negotiate a better deal. These are things that a lot of people don't think about. You're paying the monthly fee, but have you call back to try and negotiate a better deal? Perhaps you can go to another supplier of whatever it is, and you can get a cheaper price. These are things that people don't do. They're not thinking about it, but it's something that they need to do. Every single one of their monthly bills can be renegotiated for a cheaper price. This is something that I tell the common individual all the time, and you know what? It's an excellent thing that they can save money today. Literally starting today, they can begin to save money, pay off that debt, and get out of the monetary system. And this is really the basics. You want to have your money out of the banking system. That's very important. And some basic food supplies and medical kits, things like this are essentials for people to have. It's not only just good to, in case of disaster, financial disaster, maybe there's a hyperinflation where food becomes too expensive to purchase. You could also have the situation of a natural disaster. What about in that situation? People aren't prepared for that. So just some basics to have around the house are really good to have.
All right, David Quintieri, I appreciate you joining us here on Rethinking the Dollar. Tell us how we can support your work and get involved with what you're doing and follow you and things like that.
Absolutely. So I'm at the Money GPS on YouTube. You can get me on there. Also at themoneygps.com. I have a book which is available on Amazon, and you can just type in the Money GPS and see me there. But I would like to see a lot of new subscribers on the YouTube channel there, and please let me know if you've come from this interview. It's always good to hear see the community as it grows here, and that's it. I really enjoyed being on today.
Thank you, David. Look forward to speaking to you, and definitely I will follow your work because you do a great job, man. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
This concludes my interview with David Quintieri from the Money GPS. I hope you found this discussion to be entertaining. I want to encourage you to get a copy of his book, The Money GPS. You can also follow his work at themoneygps.com. Also, visit Rethinking the Dollar, where you get a chance to test your money IQ, as well as to get a copy of my free ebook, The Simplicity of Money. And also visit Facebook. Give me a thumbs up there. I often share monetary news on a daily basis there, where definitely you will learn some new things there as well. Other than that, I'll see you soon. Thank you.